All right, welcome back to Bard and Barrel. We are on our 7-part series of Know Your Players as DMs, and we are wrapping up this series. This is our final video number 7 on storytelling. We're going through storytelling today. We're going to be going through how you can recognize who those players are, and then as DMs, what are the things you can do to engage those players at your table, make sure that they're having fun, and in return, you're having fun, right? So let's hop right into this one. Riley, do you want to start us off?
Yes. Players who love storytelling want to contribute to a narrative. They like it when their characters are heavily invested in an unfolding story, and they enjoy encounters that are tied to and expand an overarching plot.
These players are going to push you as a DM, right? They're your main questers. They want to know, they're completely engaged in your story. They're curious about it. They want to reveal the mysteries that you have to offer them, right? And at the same time, they want their characters to have character arcs. They want to have changes that happen in their characters. They also want you to include stuff from their backstories, right? Different pieces of information, people that they know, lore that they carry, magic items that they have received from, parents or great grandpas that, passed down the breastplate of righteousness for years to come, whatever it might be. They feel important when bits and pieces of themselves, those characters, can fit into your overarching narrative or campaign.
These are usually the characters, or players, excuse me, that will write novels for their backstories. They'll have so much information, which is a blessing and a curse because it gives you plenty to go from when you want to connect, the player to the actual campaign, fitting in their backstories into the plot. But at the same time, that means you got to read a novel to get there. And so it can be both a blessing and a curse, depending on what type of DM you are.
Those are your storytellers. And so there's a couple different things that you can do to engage those players. Starting us off right here, it says engage your players who like storytelling by using their characters' backgrounds to help shape the stories of the campaign.
These players are ones, unlike all the other types of players, they are the most progressively satisfied players. It takes a lot more time to reward these players because as the plot unfolds, they feel like they're more involved and more rewarded as a result. And so these aren't players, unfortunately, that you can just in one session, and maybe you can, but in one moment, just reward them with a magic item and they're happy. There's a lot more to it that kind of satisfies these players. But obviously, linking their backstory to the campaign gives them, a reason to kind of help tell the story as well. During the campaign that we mentioned before, Christian DM'd it, that was all based on our backstories. There was a point in the campaign where one of the players apparently was secretly a noble. And we had a moment where he ran into a guard, like literally ran into a guard, and they fell over or whatever, and it knocked his hood off that he was kind of concealing himself with. And this dude recognized him. He was apparently from, that same area and called him out on it, inadvertently, being like, "Oh, my lord, I'm sorry," And he's like, I'm not a lord. Like, what are you talking about? And the rest of us were like, "Whoa, wait, hold on. What? You're a noble? Like, we didn't know this. You didn't tell us." And it just created this moment where we were all like, even us as players, we had no idea this was part of his backstory, and it was now kind of revealed in this moment, and it created this whole dynamic to where us as players now were very invested in his story arc moving forward.
It is your job as a DM to help your players create unity at the table, right? And I think you can do that a little more by introducing them, to each other. Obviously, they know who they are, but behind the curtain, you've got a lot of different information that they really don't know. Not only can that also drive the regular plot forward, right? For example, these guards ended up giving the players some information on where they might be able to go next. But that storytelling player, he felt very important in that situation. As the player, he's like, oh wow, this like really pertains to me and is very much more heavily invested. And you'll notice that, and that's kind of how you can reveal a lot of your storytellers too, is if you feed them some of the things from their backstory, how engaged they are to interact with those options. Riley, an excellent example that you had, as well as we had an old barbarian. He had a long line of tribes that he was a part of, and just randomly came across was like a statue of his great uncle, or I don't remember who it was, but somebody very near and dear to him. The player was very engaged to interact with this and seek for more information and really pursue that opportunity. And so you can use just bits and pieces, sprinkle them in, and then you can turn that into basically like a side quest that can help propel the campaign forward.
Yeah, that example. I think it was a legend that he had grown up hearing about, and this was like his final resting place, and this was a statue built to commemorate him. And up until this point, that character had only known him as in stories, but to find out that he was real, like it gave him, he looked up to him a lot as a player, and so in that moment, it kind of gave him a lot of vigor to move forward and continue, to be good or whatever it was that he was working on. And so it was just like a morale boost for him, in ways to kind of connect that. And so these players, like I said, take a little bit more work to reward. But man, when you do, they're probably the most satisfying when you see it light up on their face. Like you stated, when you bring something in from their backstory and you notice how all of a sudden, like an hour has gone by and you haven't said anything because the players are, going through and talking about certain stuff, and it's very satisfying to be able to sit back and feel like, wow, that was awesome. Like I didn't have to do much, and the players just kind of took it and ran with it, and it makes you feel good about how you brought up your campaign, and it makes the players feel very engaged. Similarly to that, moving on to our second point, engage these players also by making sure an encounter advances the story in some way. This does not have to be specific to the main quest. Allow yourself, when in your planning, to have some points of information kind of free, if I could put it that way, very vague, in the fact that you can kind of put these little tidbits in anywhere. If the players decide to derail and do a side quest quick, they do certain things, and there's certain information that they end up finding without meaning to that pertains back to the campaign, and it kind of links in what their actions are to the campaign, and it makes them feel like they never really strayed from the path.
In one of the campaigns I ran, there was a lot of side quests that were broken up to build renown and to get get famous in these towns, as well as build relationships and get a lot of help. And so players would be doing a lot of side quests, but it was for an overall purpose, which was to progress that campaign forward.
This is a great example of failing forward. I know I've mentioned it a lot in some of our other videos, but just because the players don't end up going down, the main quest that you have planned, allow it to connect somehow. Figure out a way for it to connect in the moment, even if you have to kind of improvise it. It really helps the players feel connected to the world. And to our next point, making their character actions steer future events. For those of you that are more veteran DMs, I mean, you've experienced players in, I must say, every campaign at some point will screw something up. Allow that screw up to become a storytelling moment. Most of the campaigns that we've been a part of, we reference back a lot at certain times, and then we think, that had nothing to do with the main quest. That was just crap that we did on the side. But that's the stuff that we remember. That was the fun, interacting moments. We started a band in one of our campaigns. Had nothing to do with what we were actually doing. It just happened to be something that we did in a moment, and it just became a meme as part of that campaign. It's like the number one thing we remember. And so Allow the players' mistakes and successes to become part of that story and reference that later. It allows them to feel important.
Couple things off the top of my head that come to mind, right? Maybe they don't end up killing one of the bad guys that he begs for his life and they let him go, and maybe he helps him out later, right? Or maybe the opposite. Maybe he plans to get back at them and ambushes them at some point. You can include a lot of those things into the future stories. I actually had a campaign where I had the party get split. They were fighting the big bad guy. And he ended up banishing half of them to a different realm. On that realm, they met this character named Gad, and he helped them be able to escape that realm and get back to the original one that they were on. Well, in a whole nother campaign, our players, once again, I don't remember exactly how, but they ended up getting tossed into another, back into that same realm, and they came across Gad again. But he was able to, help them out once again.
That's a good point you bring up, Christian. For those DMs that have a group that you have a longevity with, or you've had a longevity with, having a world. I've had a DM in the past where all of his campaigns are based out of the same world. It's just a matter of what time frame each campaign's from, and so it's actually really cool whenever we started a new campaign. If it was in the future or if it was in the past, the history now of that world in this new campaign technically was a previous campaign, and so we knew as players what the history was because we lived through it. We played that we caused that history, and we're now in the future in a different campaign. And so this, now we're talking multi-campaign level, for satisfying these type of storytellers. But this plays dividends. If you're going to be a long time with these types of players, this would help immensely. Even just starting a new campaign within the same world, introducing them back into, a character from a different campaign that it took us a minute. And I remember that moment, that player was like, wait, hold on. I know you. Like, as a player, I know you. My character doesn't, but I know you. Hold on. This is awesome. I know who you are. And it was just cool because even though it had nothing to do with the current issue at hand, him as a player got excited because he knew, hey, I've met this guy before. I interacted with him. He's cool, blah, blah, blah. And he already had this rapport with the character. And it allows them to just automatically start with an attachment to the campaign or to the plot.
On that same topic, brings us to our last point on here. It says, engage your players by giving NPCs ideals, bonds, and flaws that the adventurers can exploit. This is an interesting one, and kind of funny that it falls under, I feel like it would almost fall under acting a little bit. But these are things such as they're talking to the bartender, and the bartender's like, well, I really shouldn't be telling you this, but so-and-so's a snitch. He's like a big gossiper, and he's giving you information that you generally shouldn't, and that might be a little flaw that they can exploit as players. Another example might be, you have a very small character. Maybe he's easily intimidated, right? If they can figure out how to exploit your characters, they're going to feel, this kind of goes along with the problem solving, but they're going to feel like they're thwarting, your plan as the DM, but also kind of helming the narrative themselves, driving it in the direction that they want.
Considering this similar to puzzles, they require a little bit of a hint for the players to understand what it is that they're supposed to do to solve it. And for the players to know that the character has a flaw or a way to kind of give them an edge, act it out, show these flaws rather than, telling them.
And it doesn't take too much, right? Pick one thing and just kind of lean in on that, right? Are they super agreeable? Are they a full-blown liar, right? Maybe they're scared of everything. Maybe they're, whatever it might be. And just really, lean in on that personality and see what your players do with it. That's the most important part of probably about all of these things is practice, practice, practice. You're going to get better as you stretch yourself and try to include all these different pieces to engage your players.
It will take a lot of trial and error. It will. You'll probably fail at this more than you will succeed in the first little bit. I know this is something that I struggle with, and it takes a lot of work.
I would say try and start with just including players, characters, background, and just getting involved with them, right? It's okay. In fact, I recommend to call them or text them outside of the game and say, hey, I want to know, I know you're really invested in your character. What are your goals with your character? Where do you want him to be? What kind of arc do you want him to have, right? And if they've really invested in that character and they've got this in mind, then they're probably going to tell you, right? I've had a session where it was an online session, so we had the benefit of this, but I muted everybody and I had Riley sitting across from me, and I said, all right, here's the situation. How do you want to proceed? This is a moment where we either end this or we don't, right? How much progression do you want with this character? And so he ended up, closing the arc right there. Party was screaming at us from the thing. They're like, they muted us. But talk to your players. Figure out what makes them tick. Figure out what they want for their characters, and then help them achieve those things. If you can do that, your storytellers are going to be sold every single time that they come to the table.
Go ahead and wrap it up, dude.
And that's I guess that's everything from us. It has been awesome to go through all 7 of these. We've loved every single bit of this. We'll probably come back to it. There's so much in here. We could talk for hours and hours and hours on this. If you haven't checked out our other videos, go ahead, run back, check them out. Thank you for listening. We will figure out another series, and we will be getting it to you guys soon. We'll catch you next time on Bard and Barrel.